You ever notice how the first airplane someone wants to buy is almost always more airplane than they need? It happens to most every first time buyer. Because when you're new to ownership, you don't know what you actually will do with an airplane. You haven't lived with it yet. You haven't gone through the honeymoon period. You haven't learned what you really need or what you really want from an aircraft, just what you have imagined and daydreamed about. And you haven't discovered how your spouse or your kids or your dog are actually going to feel in turbulence. And you haven't owned an airplane long enough to understand what your flying life is actually going to look like. But the idea of the airplane, the identity, the image, the confidence, that capability, that part is powerful. And it can be a very expensive mistake if you are forced to flip that aircraft quicker than you planned. So today we're going to talk about the lure of buying more airplane than you need, especially as a first-time aircraft owner. Not to judge it, not to shame it, but to understand it and hopefully help you make better decisions because of it. Welcome back to The Truth About the Market, where we cut through the noise and talk about what's really happening in aviation, not the hype, not the headlines, but the truth. I'm Jason Zilberbrand, president of VREF. I've appraised just about everything from Cessnas to Gulfstreams, for clients that range from the FAA and SpaceX to celebrities and Fortune 50 companies, as well as fleets you've definitely heard of. And most importantly, I've owned, I've sold, and I've operated my own aircraft. And equally important, this podcast is sponsorship free. There is no commercial paid for opinions, no spins, just the unfiltered truth. And today we're addressing a pattern that repeats itself across nearly everyone who's ever sat down with controller.com at midnight. And for those of you who are doing it, you probably should stop. The worst thing to do is be shopping for aircraft late at night or shopping for anything late at night. The first airplane someone wants to buy usually reflects who they hope they're becoming, who the pilot they're becoming, not who they are today. And it's that mismatch, the fantasy versus reality, identity versus what your real mission is where the airplane steps in and starts teaching you. Because airplanes are excellent teachers. Unfortunately, those lessons are very expensive. So this episode is about avoiding unnecessary tuition. That is, if you want to avoid the mistakes that I made, buying the wrong aircraft for all the wrong reasons, because after all, the school of hard knocks can be very expensive. So why the first airplane is almost always the wrong airplane. It's, when someone is new to aviation, everything feels like it's possible. You literally spend hours every day fantasizing about your new life, your new airplane, and the access you will have to the world. If I own an airplane, I'll travel more. We'll go to the lake house every weekend. I'll use it for business trips. Hell, we'll fly to Florida instead of driving. And all of that could be true. But what's more often true is this. People buy because of their best friend's referral or the countless ads they see on Controller or Trade a Plane, or because the plane just looks sexy. But rarely do first-time buyers have the experience or the knowledge about what aircraft they really need, so they buy with a ton of emotion. Real-world use is never as romantic as imagined use. And that's not a failure, it's clarity. It's offset by the many bills you'll start seeing in your email box. That's because freedom and friendships, they come at a price. And in all seriousness, this honeymoon period is the time you go everywhere, because you can. And all of a sudden, those trips start to pile up on your old bank account. So if we want to keep people in aviation and keep people moving up through the cabin class food chain, then you want to avoid an out-of-control budget in buying either too much of an aircraft, too old of an aircraft, or too good of a deal, because we've talked about this a lot. We've spoken about the fact that a lot of good deals, they're dangerous because you wind up paying for what other people utilize. That's why you're getting such a smoking deal. And the honeymoon period, well, that can be just as dangerous. I have literally seen first-time buyers become a first-time seller all in less than 6 months. Because aviation sounded really good, but the cash kept flowing out, and that got really scary, and it forced them to sell the aircraft. First-time buyers, they don't have clarity yet. They don't know what normal utilization is yet. So the first airplane they're drawn to isn't the one that really fits their flying lifestyle, it's the one that fits their identity narrative. This episode is brought to you by VREF, the trusted name in aircraft valuations and appraisals. Whether you fly a piston single or manage a business jet fleet, VREF keeps you grounded in data that matters. Visit vref.com to know what your aircraft is really worth before you buy, sell, or finance. So let's talk about the seduction of capability. Because when you're buying your first airplane, it's very easy to confuse capability with need, especially when capability is marketed as safety. And here's the reality. Every time you add a feature or capability to an airplane, you also add cost, complexity, and responsibility. So let's talk through it clearly. Here are some very common features that I think get people into hot water relatively quick because it gets very expensive to maintain. FIKI, no nice, right? It allows you to dispatch into more weather, but it also adds pumps and boots and panels and a ton of inspections. And then there's training requirements. And the real liability is if you don't actually fly IFR regularly, you know, you don't need it. Insurance is going to be higher. And a lot of these aircraft are older. And so these systems tend to be a real sore spot for both dispatch reliability and maintenance costs. I mean, I recently saw a quote for FIKI to add FIKI to an old airplane. It was like $150,000. It was like basically the cost of the aircraft. In other words, if you don't need it or aren't going to use it or can't use it because you don't have the capabilities as a pilot, you're probably better off not buying it because it just costs a lot more to maintain an aircraft with it. Um, Turbochargers, that goes right along with FIKI. Turbochargers are an interesting one. It gives better climb, it gives better cruise at altitude, but it also adds temperature management, and it will put a bunch of stress on your engine. You got higher fuel burn. You're going to have to pay more attention as a pilot because the truth is, if you don't live in a mountain region or plan on flying through them often, you can skip it. And the case in point is the SR-22. The Turbo is their flagship. It's the most expensive aircraft. But the SR-22, the naturally aspirated version, in my opinion, is a better airplane. It depreciates slower. More people want it. We're going to talk more about this later. Pressurization. It's another feature. At its core, it's a life support system. It allows a piston aircraft to climb into the, high teens and low flight levels by maintaining a safe cabin altitude. Usually, those aircraft fly between 8,000 and 12,000 feet. While the airplane itself might be flying much higher, the pressurization system works by regulating airflow, pressure differentials, and carefully controlled outflow valves to keep the cabin comfortable and to allow you to breathe easier. And when everything's working perfectly, pressurization systems, they turn long trips into smooth, quiet, efficient, flying, makes it a lot more comfortable. But when something in the system degrades or a seal dries out or a controller drifts and pressurization is lost, the consequences are immediate and unforgiving. Hypoxia doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like nothing at all, right up until the point where you're cognitively gone. No joking aside, this isn't just about complexity, it's about cost and risk. Pressurization components are expensive. And a lot of these aircraft are aging, and they're incredibly difficult to source these parts. Troubleshooting is also a very big issue, and it's slow and time consuming. A small leak can ground the airplane for weeks, and where repairs are needed, there are fewer technicians trained to work on these systems today. That's why you almost never see pressurization in modern production for piston aircraft anymore. Cirrus, Beech, Cessna, none of them build a pressurized piston aircraft today. The industry moved on because owners realize something. The mission profiles that require pressurization are better served by turboprops and light jets, where the systems are not only more robust, but the aircraft are designed to live in those altitudes. In the piston world, pressurization didn't vanish because it didn't work. It vanished because most pilots, the risk and the complexity outweighed the benefit. These systems aren't bad. They're incredible when your mission actually requires them. But if you are flying in areas or parts of the country where those systems aren't needed, they don't give you added safety. They give you added expenses and added workload. This is where most full-time buyers get pulled off course, so to speak, right? They skip straight to imagining about an airplane they want to be seen in instead of determining the airplane that fits the life they actually live. So the very first step in choosing the right airplane is not the airplane. It's actually the budget, because the budget will force clarity. The budget sets boundaries. The budget reveals what your priorities should be. It pushes the emotion aside long enough for reality to speak. Once you define what you can spend and what you can afford, to sustain and operate, then you work backwards. You reverse engineer. It should go budget, mission, features or capabilities, and then the airplane. Because if you go the other way around, you got to ask yourself, what is the one feature or capability I actually need to support the flying I want to do most often? Maybe it's useful load because you fly with your family. Maybe it's the number of seats. Um, Maybe it's an autopilot because you fly longer legs. Maybe you need more horsepower. You know, or we could talk about FIKI because yes, you fly in real IFR and you fly in real weather. But clarity comes from this. Need first, desire second. Identity should never enter the equation, because when your airplane aligns with your mission and your budget and your actual flying habits, it's going to support your life. When the airplane is built for a mission you don't fly, it owns you. So let's talk about that. I told you we were going to circle back to the SR-22, so let's talk about it, because it's the perfect example of how emotion can beat mission during a first-time purchase. The Cirrus SR-22 Turbo is a really phenomenal airplane. It's super modern, super capable, super comfortable. Ergonomics like none other. The avionics suite is incredible. We've got real support. You've got real range, real utility. And Cirrus has quickly become the number one aircraft manufacturer for a reason. They build a high quality aircraft that holds their value. And they also built a culture around it, like Porsche and Ferrari. Cirrus owners are proud to be associated with the brand. That's the magic. And if your flying is taking you into the mountains, or if you're routinely flying higher altitudes to get over weather, or if you live at high elevation, or if your trips are long, the SR-22 is exactly the right tool. But here's the issue. Most first-time buyers don't fly that mission, and more don't have the budget for a new SR-22 Turbo, whose price, by the way, it starts at $1.2 million, and it has a 2-year waiting time. So if you bought one today, you'd get it in 2 years, and that price is going to be closer to $1.4 million. The truth is, most people, they fly under 10,000 feet. They don't fly flights longer than 300 nautical. They don't fly when the weather isn't good. They don't take off from unpaved airports. And most of the time, they fly alone. So the Turbo isn't really adding anything to the mission. But hey, if you're the type of buyer that likes to check every box, and I know how that is because I am one of them, maybe you do want a Turbo. But this might be one of those features that you're signing up more, for more than you bargained for, because buying capability before you need it can turn your first year of ownership into your hardest year of flying. Because, with an airplane like an SR-22 Turbo comes engine temperature management and turbo system management and fuel flow discipline. And you're going to have higher temperature sensitivity and increased insurance requirements. And of course, because those parts are operating at higher temperatures, you're going to have to replace them more often. You're also going to have higher shop rates, and you're going to have more downtime, and you're going to have more systems that you're going to have to stay on top of in order to stay safe. So if you're at the beginning stages and you're still learning how to fly, your habits, your comfort with weather, your spouse's preferences, your natural risk profile, then the airplane is now out ahead of your experience and instead of walking with you. And when the airplane is ahead of you, you don't fly more, you fly less, right? And that's why you see a lot of them for sale, because, it's really hard not to take every option. And this is one of those situations where it's not a Mercedes, guys. You're not checking off the AMG box. It's not going to take you 0 to 60 faster, right? In a lot of these cases, the regular naturally aspirated aircraft is better. When you don't fly your airplane as much as you intended, or you don't fly it at all, you start to second guess yourself. You start to avoid marginal days. You worry about, temperatures, and you start to feel like the airplane's judging you because you're not using it enough. And, you know, now that the airplane is supposed to represent freedom, it's become a source of pressure for you. So, you know, uh, the SR-22 is like a graduation aircraft. It's not a first lesson aircraft. And let's be honest, if you had $1.4 million to spend and lived in the mountains, would you really buy an SR-22 turbo? Probably not, because this mission would be way better suited with many aircraft that trade at that dollar amount. Hell, you're in light jet territory. See, and that's where first time ownership goes sideways. Remember, this isn't like checking off the AMG engine box. If you're tired of guessing about aircraft values, try VREF Online. Real-time data, quarterly updates, and over 900 models at your fingertips. From residual value forecasts to depreciation trends, it's the platform trusted by lenders, insurance companies, and professionals worldwide. Subscribe today at vref.com and start making decisions based on facts, not feelings. So, here's the real question you need to ask yourself before you buy an airplane. What is your mission? Before you choose an aircraft, you got to get honest about this. It's not what you daydream about. It's not what you talk about, with your friends. It's not the mission you hope you'll grow into someday. I mean, if you're planning on flying to Florida and you don't have the home in Florida yet, talk about being out of whack, right? Your real mission is the flying that you're going to do over and over and over again. It's the 80% of your flights. It's not the 20% exception. We've talked about this. The actual Saturday morning flight patterns you live, not the cross-country fantasy reel playing in your head, that's what matters. Maybe your mission is local flights after work to clear your mind. Maybe it's 150 nautical mile hops to see your family. Maybe it's just a solo practice to stay sharp, or maybe you like to take your kids up for 20-minute joyrides on the weekends. All of those are valid. None of them are more impressive than the others. They're simply yours. And that's what's important here. Your first airplane should be built for the flying you actually do, not the flying you imagine looks impressive to others. Because the airplane that fits your mission will be easier to fly. It'll cost less to maintain, right? It's going to get used way more often. This is the truth. And it'll build confidence instead of building pressure. And it'll support growth instead of requiring it. And as your flying evolves, and it will, trust me, you can move up naturally. That might mean more seats or maybe more speed or better climb performance or better weather capability or eventually, yes, turbos or pressurization or even a backcountry STOL aircraft. But you grow into that when your flying makes the case for it, not when your ego does. Because here's the simplest truth in aviation. The airplane that brings you joy is the one that you will fly the most. And flying more is what makes you a better pilot. Your mission is already telling you what airplane makes sense. You just have to be willing to listen to the life you're actually living, not the one you're auditioning for. So let's take a look at a real world question, like the one I get asked almost every day of every week. And this comes from a guy whose mission is 250 nautical mile trips, and he wants to legitimately go buy $500 burgers. He wants to restart his IFR training, and he wants to finish his CPL. He's got a budget of $150K. Most of his flights are going to be with 2 people, sometimes 3 in bags. His weather, marine layer is very common, so he wants a solid IFR training platform. And he would prefer something that's faster than a 172 or a Warrior. And his conundrum is that he's 6'3" and 210 pounds. So on top of all of this, comfort matters. So what aircraft come to mind? What should he buy? So the obvious one is the Cessna 182. And it's the default answer for a reason. It's roomy for tall pilots. It's got a great useful load. It's got a great cruise speed. It's got a huge parts and STC support network. It's a stable IFR platform. It's got speed mods. You can do autopilots. Whatever you want to do, you can do. And the 182s appreciate if you own them long enough. So this is actually an aircraft that your future sales price could potentially offset your current ownership costs. It's a great aircraft, and it's the reason why it's like in the top three every single week in terms of trades and in terms of how it holds its value. So it's a really good aircraft for this mission. Another one that I think gets overlooked is the Beech Debonair. It's an early Bonanza, right? It's often overlooked. It's the baby Bonanza. Later Debonairs are effectively Bonanzas with different badging. It's an excellent handling aircraft, and it's a strong cross-country performing aircraft. You know, some of the holdbacks, comfort is subjective. It might not be the best aircraft for this guy, but these aircraft have a ton of support. And there's a reason why the Bonanza is the number one selling single engine performance aircraft. So many pilots will refuse to fly anything else. It's literally beach or nothing. So this is another good one that would fit this mission. A less sexier alternative, but a really smart economical one would be a Piper Arrow. You know, um, a lot of them have been upgraded with modern GPS, and a lot of them have autopilots. And again, you can do IFR training in them. The turbo will add, flexibility when it comes to weather, but you got to be honest about whether or not you'll use it. These trainers do very, very well. They're super affordable. They're super easy to operate, and they're a piece of cake to finance. What if you're looking for a little bit more speed? Um, and you're on that same budget, then my answer would be the Mooney, the M20J. It's fast, it's efficient. Uh, the seating position, let's be honest, this is the bugaboo. It's love it or leave it. Taller pilots, skinny versus bigger frame. It's one of those planes where you literally got to try it before you buy it. Do not buy a Mooney without flying it. It'll be the biggest mistake of your life. If it fits your body style or frame, it is probably the best 250 nautical mile aircraft out there. If you have a lower budget and you want speed, this is the plane. And they do very, very well in the resale market. But like everything that goes fast, if you're a bigger guy, you're going to want to look elsewhere. Um, Kind of a hidden gem, one that I see quite often is the Grumman Tiger, the AA5B, and it's a fixed gear, fixed pitch. It's a simple aircraft, 140 knot cruise, sporty. Um, it's great value aircraft for bigger people. It seems to be more comfortable. So this is definitely one that's up there. And talk about an airplane that holds its value. This thing holds its value like a rock. And if you don't have the big bucks, it's a really good lower budget aircraft to look at. Um, Another option, although probably not my first option, but I think you'll get my drift. Partnerships, right? So with two or three partners, you can buy a way more expensive airplane. And you can also split the operating costs. And I probably have two or three partnerships that come to me every week to ask me to appraise the aircraft and help them, negotiate the deal. And likewise, I probably have two or three a week that come to me and ask me to help them exit the deal. Partnerships are like marriages. So you just have to be very, very careful with the people that you're entering into the partnership with. And you have to realize that one partner is going to probably be the managing partner. So, my advice is, if you don't want or don't need a super expensive newer aircraft, you can probably find a lower price one and do it all on your own. A quick note on speed, because I think this is a big misnomer too. On a 250 nautical mile leg trip, if you have 130 cruise versus 155 cruise aircraft, did you know that it only saves you like 19 minutes? So while that probably isn't a lot, the longer you go, the more it's going to save you, but you're going to pay a lot for, not only you're going to pay a lot for those 25 knots, but you're going to pay a lot for those 19 or 20 minutes too. So just keep that in mind. Bottom line is for this guy's mission and budget, start with a clean, well-maintained 182 or a Debonair. Um, It'll fit his frame, and in my opinion, it's probably not worth spending the money to chase another 15 or 20 knots. Your first airplane does not need to be your forever airplane because actually, chances are you will outgrow and be looking to trade in the aircraft you're looking to buy now before you know it, right? Aircraft ownership is not a proclamation, it's a progression. On a personal note, before we close, my hero growing up was Warren Buffett. Warren is not famous for headlines, but for the discipline. He buys with purpose and he holds with conviction and he ignores the noise. And as he prepares to step down as Berkshire's CEO and go quiet, he's reminding all of us that endurance and clarity beat adrenaline and trend chasing. His mindset maps perfectly to aviation ownership. Buy what you'll be happy to hold when the weather goes down and the market goes quiet. Make decisions you're proud of 10 years from now, not 10 minutes after a ramp selfie. Buffett is known for being frugal, rational, and immune to impulse. But here's the part most people forget. He was also an advocate for business aviation. He understood something that the loudest critics never grasped, that aircraft are not just machines. They are time machines, freedom machines, reach and leverage and connection machines. And he famously supported the MBAA campaign, no plane, no gain. And it's almost poetic that the most cost-conscious billionaire of all time, the cultural symbol of modesty and consistency and delayed gratification, understood the value of an airplane better than most. So buy the airplane that fits the life you're living now and allow your flying life to evolve into the airplane that comes next. If this conversation helped you see the market differently, do me a favor. Share this episode, subscribe, hit the subscribe button. And remember, when you need accurate, defensible, and data-driven aircraft values, there's only one name in the industry to trust, and that's VREF. Visit vref.com to get started today. Thanks for listening. I'm Jason Zilberbrand. This is The Truth About the Market. Until next time, fly safe and stay smart.